All right, that seems like a really good place to get this show on the road. Hello, everyone. Again, a really warm welcome to you all. Thank you so much for joining us for today's webinar, Introducing European Women Plus, the new fit standard for plus size fashion. My name is Saul Guzman. I am the VP of Brand and Communications at Alvanon, and I will be your moderator today. While we wait for everyone to join, tell us where you're joining us from. We already saw in the chat, we have a bunch of people from Toronto, the Netherlands, the US. We'd love to hear where you're dialing in from. And for those of you not familiar with Alvanon, we are a global innovations company for apparel brands and retailers of all sizes. Our digital body technology and body shape data together ensures better fit and sizing and less waste for the fashion and apparel industry. Now, before we get started, here are a few housekeeping things. Today's presentation will run roughly 40 minutes. We will leave plenty of time at the end for a Q&A, so please submit any questions via the Q&A button in your Zoom toolbar. This webinar is also being recorded, and the recording will be sent out 24 hours after the completion of this webinar. If you're experiencing any technical difficulties during the presentation, you can reach out to me directly through the chat box, and I will do my best to help you out. All right, let's see, we have a good 200 people in the audience, and we would like to get to know more about those of you joining us today. Please take a moment to answer this poll so we can get a sense of who is in the room. You should have 2 questions for you. All right, the first question is, do you work with plus size forms and mannequins? Yes, no, sometimes I would like to. And the question number 2 is, do you work with 3D or in 3D product design? Yes, no, sometimes, and I would like to. We see a bunch of people answering the poll. This is really exciting. We have about 60% of you already answered. All right, and yeah, and please let us know in the chat what you're most looking forward to or hearing about today. Like I mentioned today at Alvanon, we're very excited to introduce our new Alvanon Fit and Sizing Standard, European Women Plus. This standard represents the actual size, shape, and stature of Women Plus customers in the European market today. This standard also rounds out our full catalog of sizing standards for our European population, including men's, women, and children. If you haven't seen those sizing standards, please go ahead and do. We'll share those links with you at the end of the webinar. All right, but first things first, we have very special guests from the Alvanon's European team. Alvanon's Executive Director for Europe, Ton Wiedenhoff, to tell us more about today's segment, recent growth, and the enormous market opportunity it presents. Hi, Ton.
Hi, thanks.
How are you?
To you. Hi. Hi, everyone. Well, actually, I'm very excited and very happy, actually, that today we're able to introduce the European Women Plus Size Standard Series here. And we've experienced a huge demand out of the European region. So brands, retailers, workwear companies, as they've been looking for tools which they could use to develop, clothing, garments, collections, to cater and to help the consumer base out there, the inclusive plus size market. So I'm just really very excited. And actually, I hope, well, actually, I should say I'm very convinced that all of you will really like the introduction and the presentation of Don and Christina and Kimberly of these European standards, which they've been so much working on so hard to give this to us today. So actually, I don't want to say more and actually just give the floor to Don, Christina, and Kimberly. And the floor is yours, guys. Enjoy.
All right, thank you so much, Ton. All right, now without any further ado, I'd like to introduce the incredible team leading this new research and today's speakers. Alvanon, Executive Director of Consulting, Don Howard, Director of Blocks and Grading Service, Christina Onusco, and Senior Technical Consultant of Blocks and Grading, Kimberly Week. Enough from me now. I'd like to hand this over to Don. Don, are you there?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me? Can you see me?
I can hear you.
Super.
Yes, and I
Thanks
can
so
see
much,
it.
Sal. And thanks to you, Ton, and welcome everybody. We're so excited today to be able to share this newest launch from Alvanon Standard Series. And of course, in this webinar, we're going to provide you with the details and context for this particular standard. But also, we really want to spend some time on some practical topics for the use of these standards when it comes to digitalized tools in 3D. And because of that, I have joining with me Christina Onosco, who is our Director of Blocks and Grading. Chris, you can wave hello.
Everyone.
Yeah.
Hello.
And Kimberly Wick, who works alongside Chris in that area of our business as well. And really, they're here to help bring some additional insights and context to this conversation, the types of things that we work with our clients on a daily basis. And we think that would be really interesting to put into this particular launch. So let's see if I can advance my slide. As you all know, we all know that when it comes to apparel in particular, or anything else, if you don't have a standard, it's really difficult to make logical decisions or taking action, right? So we know that tools for success are all about standardization. And, just to give you a little background for those who don't know, we've always made every effort to provide updated regional standards as kind of off the shelf, if you would, fit tool options for our clients. Obviously, the physical fit forms, and also in today's world, identical virtual ALVAFORM. So this is for, if you want to know how it works, how the sausage is made, so to speak, we create them in our consulting and 3D modeling team. There's a lot of things that we try to put into that. But recently, we've been very focused on trying to provide some practical access to more inclusive ranges that really reflect the diversity of today's end-use consumer, right? And above all, through the development of things like complete size sets, we're here to help continue the advancements in our technology, because we're keenly focused on supporting the overall digitization of industry, which is really here. It's no longer the future. It's here right now, and we want our clients to experience the success that comes along with that. So the big question, I guess, a lot of people ask it, I guess in particular, you could ask why plus, and in this instance is why are we talking about European plus? And I like to take a little bit of a step back and put some context to the question. And we have to ask ourselves, is plus size really new? And I think the answer to that is really no. And if we're not addressing it, why? So if you just take a quick look at this slide, which might be kind of, might make you bristle in today's age, but we can go back 100 years to the first kind of notion of creating ready-to-wear garments for people who might have been bigger in size. And they referred to it, unfortunate terms like stoutwear, right? When you think about that, it's ghastly today. And the intention of that was to create product that would make someone look slimmer or smaller, right? Kind of mask what might be their true natural size. So we also see the earliest usage of the term plus size by an American women's fashion brand, Lane Bryant, in 1922. Again, that's 100 years ago. And then quickly we notice that there are other pioneers in the plus size market, namely a UK retailer, Evans, that emerged as early as the 1930s. I also kind of want to say right at the outset, when we talk about plus size, we're using that as a technical term, okay, as a technical designation. We'll talk at the end of the presentation a little bit more about what you call these things. But when we're talking about plus size today in a technical conversation, it has to do with a classification of specialty sized garments, okay? So if we take a look in Europe in particular, there's a pretty kind of interesting lineage and timeline. We start with the Evans brand in 1930. I'm not going to go through each and every one of these. You guys, you know the brands, you see them. I know Ulla Popkin comes up as a very prominent brand that we've all known about, we've worked with over the years. But you can see that it really is nothing new. So in that spirit, I also wanted to let you know that not only is it not new to Europe, it's really a global conversation. And if you see this map and you see the little fit form icons, they're just meant to designate areas of the world where we currently work with clients on their plus sizing strategy. So, some of them may be interesting, certainly North America, Canada, US, and some might be interested to know that that includes Mexico, right? We have brands in Mexico that come to us for help on that. Certainly even in South America, regions in Colombia and so forth, where they have a very thriving manufacturing and apparel brand base, and they know that they need to branch out. Of course, Europe and the UK, United Arab Emirates in Saudi Arabia. We have a lot of brands come to us to work through that, even recently in India, if you can imagine, and China. And of course, let's not forget about Australia, New Zealand. These are all regions of the world where this is a topic that's well underway and has been for years. So you have to ask ourselves a question, what are some of the barriers that are there for people who want to branch into plus sizing for Europe? Now, some of these barriers are generic and they're common, but I think in the European area, they become a little bit more important to call out and analyze. The first set of these that I'm going to go through is all about perception. Okay. And for many people, perception is reality. But unfortunately, there's a perception that plus size clothing couldn't possibly be fashionable or trendy. There's a perception that plus size, we hear this all the time, is only meant for older adults. That is so not true. And there's also a perception that there's a limited market for plus size clothing, having to do with all of the above. And overarching all of that would be some sort of a stigma that may or may not be attached to a fashion brand, right? That would be creating plus size clothing. But unfortunately, it's not just fashion. Everybody needs clothes. So we have to remember, if you're making clothes for the industry, you're making them for people who need them. So, so we can touch on only a few of these areas because you could do dissertations and days of work on this. But, body positivity is one thing that has really come to fore over the last decade or so, which is all focused on acceptance, right? So body positivity promotes an acceptance. And at the same time, this acknowledgement of body positivity creates opportunities for company to enter the plus size market, to cater to the needs and preferences of this diverse range of customers. And also, you cannot discount in today's world the impact of social media, right? So since the explosion of social media, really 2010, we've seen a lot more inclusion in plus size models, right? On magazines, publications, and books. This social media has become a platform for women to be able to talk about their opinions and their needs and give them a little bit more power to see how they are going to be seen and how they're going to be perceived. And you can look up any of these hashtags, right? And even at the celebrity level, right? So it's fueled a real movement toward inclusivity and more visible diversity. So setting that aside, we're all running businesses here. So let's think about this more in terms of the business opportunities that may be available. So there's kind of this perception that, and some of it could be regional in Europe, driven Northern and Southern Europe, and I certainly am not here to get into any of that, but perception of plus sizing may differ by region. Do we really need it? Is this something we want to do? The unfortunate reality, or the business reality, is that obesity prevalence in Europe is higher than any other part of the world except for the Americas, right? And that's according to recent reporting for the European Congress on obesity, right? So we can look at metrics. Of course, BMI, if you don't know, many of you I'm sure do know, BMI is a common metric, body mass index, for kind of classification, if you will, of someone who might be underweight, regular weight, overweight, or the term called obesity, right? So this chart here simply represents many of the, the European countries, but in aggregate, we're talking about 53% of people that could be considered overweight or obese. And, you can look through some of the metrics that I'm pointing out here, but the really big one at the bottom, across the whole of Europe, right? By what does it say, 2025 or 2030, a third of the population of women is forecast to be obese. So this trend is not going away. And when you talk about 2025, that's right around the corner. We're in 2023 already. So the metrics are there to support. And then, of course, if we convert that into business and turnover, some metrics here, and feel free to do your own research. Recently as 2019 in the European market, 14.4 billion euros, right? Expected to reach 20 billion by 2025, which again, right around the corner. UK, 6.6 billion in 2019. And then, again, you can look at any metric you want to support this, but the business opportunity is there. And the question is, how are you going to handle it in your own business? What decisions are you going to make? So lastly here, before I kind of turn it over to Chris, the type of things today that we can talk about with you are some other, I would call them generic barriers to branching into plus size. And I'm sure in Europe, it's no different, right? Above all, there's a lack of standardization, right? In a sizing across the entire region. We see that in the regular ranges, right? It's so different from country to country just because that's the way it is. But then when you go up that level to, okay, how are we going to handle plus size? There's a lot of question marks. How do we do that, right? And then the other one, which for us is really important to consider, is yes, it is a complexity of the production and creation of plus size clothing, right? It does require special tools. And above all, it requires special knowledge, right? And sometimes special teams devoted to this. Of course, there's also the concept of additional cost. We're not going to get into that today because that goes beyond the premise of what we're talking about. But we can start to talking about standardization. So having given you that big drawn out dissertation here, let's go right to the reveal here. So our new European plus body, here she is. Her size designation is 50X. And what we do whenever we create a new size range, we have to start with the core body onto which you're going to do your garment evaluations, right? That's our base point. And then from there, we can figure out, okay, how do sizes get bigger and smaller from there? So just as an example here, and you have access to all this information, later on. But if we think back to our recent launch, to put this into context, recently when we launched our new European standards, we had two body shapes that we delivered. One was the European standard, which, in quotations, kind of a natural range, which refers to a more natural body shape. We also were obligated to create an Atelier range, which is really a much more idealized shape, right? If you think about very hourglass, not really predominant in the population, but there are brands who still prefer to use that. Since we launched these, it's become overwhelmingly obvious to us that people are gravitating to the natural range because it just looks more appropriate to what their customer is. Now, having said that, as you can see, the range 34 all the way up to 54, by any technical stretch of the imagination, we're really testing the boundaries of what kind of fit you really can achieve by the time you get into these bigger sizes. So we know people will try to grade their way into bigger sizes, but there's a point at which it just does not work anymore. So we decided that we would recreate our new standard at a size 50. We have to call her something different, so we call her a 50X. And now if you look at the extension of the natural standard to a size 50 in the range, which is off to the left, And then here in the middle, we have the Atelier standard at the size 50. And now you look at the new European plus 50X. When you compare them, you can see there are clear differences, right? Not only in the shape, but the fullness, the distribution of the shape. So it really is important to acknowledge that, because that's the secret in the sauce, is getting all this shape and distribution correct. Now, the other thing you might be asking is, why not 2 shapes? Well, if you remember back on this slide, the bigger you start to get, even if you've defined a different shape at kind of the middle or center of where your core size is, those shapes do start to meld together eventually. And, you know, logic dictates that one standard would be perfectly sufficient for most brands, unless brands want to add SKU count and have multiple shapes, which we know is just not reasonable. So that's kind of the methodology and the thinking behind where we would start at our core size. So that's that. I'm going to quickly segue here into to Chris, because really at the core of the conversation today is about being ready in 3D. And we know that standardization in 3D more than ever is the key to success in digital product development. So Chris, you want to go ahead and walk us through a couple of concepts here?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, we have been talking about this a lot. It really is about getting to be able to fit more inclusively in size ranges, whether you're doing an extended range or stepping into plus. It really is about bridging the great technical tools that you are used to working with already in the physical or a more tactile sense, and bridging that into 3D and how to get there. You know, we've received a lot of questions about just whenever someone gets a virtual reference, virtual ALVAFORM, about how to review it in the 3D space and what's the best way to go about doing that. And so we just want to share some thoughts around that today. We all know that trust is a key element in working in 3D, and trusting what you see, and most importantly, also understanding what you see so that you can make the right decisions for the physical prompt that you're creating. Hey, Dawn, could we go back to that first slide for 1 minute, please? You know, we really are creating real clothes for real people, and the end goal is still the production of physical garments. And so we're always focused as a company on creating tools and standards that support accurate fit. And the thing to know whenever we're talking about trust in 3D is when you have you're used to working on a physical mannequin, right, a regular ALVAFORM. And when we start to move into 3D, into the virtual ALVAFORM, you really can trust that when you're coming into 3D, you can trust immediately that the dimensions, the shape, everything about the virtual ALVAFORM truly is a digital twin to the physical ALVAFORM. It is an exact replica. It's coming from the same file. And so that's really important. And it's an important thing to keep in mind as you make that journey into 3D. So now let's go to the next slide, Don, if you would, and talk a little bit about standardized avatars. You know, we say that a lot, and sometimes it's a little confusing. So we just want to talk a little bit about it today. You know, rather than a parametric avatar where you have measurements, you might have a proportion you want, you can use a slider and kind of adjust it. If you really have a standardized avatar, then it really means that not only are you identifying, you know, you've identified your customer in size, shape, and proportion at your base or your core size, it means that that cannot be changed. So it becomes a very important tool for a brand's internal team and their technical teams, you know, whether you're a designer, a fit technician, 3D team, internal, external, especially external, where, you know, you have people thousands of miles away, and you can have that consistency maybe easier in 3D than in the physical fit form. And so making sure that everyone is using the exact same tool, yet again, now in a more sustainable and a faster way, where having a standardized avatar is so important. It definitely ensures a consistent tool for all users, no matter where they are, whether it's internally or externally, and regardless of the 3D system that they're using. And that's also really important, as opposed to the parametric option. It truly is a digital twin to the fit form and geometry And it's an essential tool so that everyone is looking at the same thing. So now, having said that, what we want to share today, we want to share some thoughts about reviewing a virtual ALVAFORM in 3D. And first and foremost, what we want to say too is always make sure your computer and your 3D software, whichever one you're using, is up to date with the most current version of that software. Super important. Be sure to follow all the tutorials when you're downloading virtual ALVAFORM from the ABP. From there, we're just going to take a look here now at some tips for reviewing that virtual ALVAFORM. Kim, you want to talk about a few slides here, what we can share from our learnings?
Sure. These are some images from Browseware software, and the avatar has been imported into the software. And we've found that, when you're reviewing it, you want to look at your software settings to get the optimal settings so that you can really see the shape and form of your avatar when you're reviewing it, especially if you're comparing it side by side to that physical form you have sitting next to you. And so what we have here is different lighting presets, background, and then body resolution. And by default in Browseware, the ambient is the preset lighting, and then with a white background. And that's what we're looking at on the left-hand side. On the right-hand side, on the far right, is a lighting preset called headlights. And you can see how with a white background, that's really washing out the virtual avatar, and you're not able to see a lot of the features of the form and the shape. In the center is the one that we kind of landed on. We prefer to work with a Studio Vivid preset with a dark gray background. And we use this when we're reviewing the form. So when we're really looking it over for shape. So this is really important. And, and this is a personal preference as well, but you want to take these things into consideration. Now, there may be other things that you do in your software also to look at the form. This is in Browseware again. And here we've turned on the wireframe function, which shows you the little triangles of the form and allows you to view the form in a different way. Now, those same lighting presets that worked on the original form they're not going to apply here. So we've kind of landed on the ambient light preset with the white background. That's what we're preferring because we get a little better visual, other than in the middle it's too dark, and then on the far right you're getting a lot of shine and reflection. So that are some key things to keep in mind when you're reviewing it. This is in the Clo 3D software, and we just thought we'd show you a video of when you bring that avatar into the software, there's default poses and views, and be sure to utilize all of them, looking at your form front, back, side, checking out all of your poses. And remember that when the virtual ALVAFORMs are developed, our modelers take into consideration, body deformation, and as your form is changing poses from the arms down pose to the A pose to the T pose, they're taking into consideration, what the human body is doing as well. Some measurements may change slightly, but that happens in real life as well. So here we're looking at the form, not just in the preset poses, but we're twirling it around, putting it at angles that you wouldn't even do with your regular form that you have sitting next to you. But it's really allowing you to see that under bust rib cage shape, shapes in the hip area, the thigh and whatnot, because of what you can do in 3D when you're looking at it. So in the wireframe, that's what I talked about earlier. And in other 3D softwares, this may be referred to as a mesh or maybe an X-ray view. But looking at it in a wireframe pose, you have those triangles and you can actually see through the form, which allows you to see, aspects of the shape that you can't see when it is solid. Let's take a look at the next one. This is a video looking at it in the software, in the wireframe, and just looking at the front back side view. But then now let's zoom in a little bit more. And it allows you to really get a good look at some of those areas that you can't normally see on a form, like the armhole shape. And as a pattern maker, I find this so valuable to be able to see that shape in 3D, and it helps me translate that to a 2D pattern. So here we're looking at the underarm, even looking at the bust shape, changing the pose into the T pose. And then now let's zoom in a little bit closer so that we can really take a good close look at the other tricky area that's really difficult to fit, which is the rise shape. Isn't that fun?
You know, isn't that great, Kim? Because a lot of times people will have a preconceived notion about the rise shape or the armhole shape based on only measurements. And being able to look at the form in this way as well, you can gather some other information about the actual body shape. I think I find it incredibly helpful as well.
Super. This is awesome, guys. Beyond your original ability to look at a fit form, right? Imagine turning it upside down and trying to see all this stuff. That's not going to happen.
Oh, I do all the time.
All right, let's talk about friction.
Yeah, so another thing with when you're bringing that form into the 3D software, another setting, this is in Browseware, you can set the friction settings on your form. And the default friction when you bring a form in is the human friction. And when you put something that, this is an example of a legging on a child form. And when you put a legging on with the friction setting at human, the legging doesn't want to stay in place when you simulate it. And we, like you see in the middle, we've had to use styling tools to hold the waist in place, to move the lines around and to hold them in place. And by changing that avatar friction to cloth, that's going to be the most similar to the form that you're fitting that garment on. And we don't have to use styling tools on that. So just to know that these settings are there and that it can affect how that garment sits on the form. And you can toggle this back and forth and change it from human to cloth, you know, whichever is going to work best for you, but be aware that that is in there because that is really tricky. You know, you're bringing that avatar into a 3D software and now you're going to start fitting in 3D and there are a lot of trust issues. And this is one of the things that we came across that, you know, we were saying we're not seeing what we're seeing on the form. And by changing these friction settings, we were able to see what we were seeing in real life in that sample.
It's all about the practical use of a tool, right? We're not creating 3D garments. We're using 3D tools to create physical garments for real people. These are just different tools for the evaluation, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah,
Super.
absolutely. And the, you know, we could talk for days, can't we, Kim, about styling and overstyling. And so we aren't talking to this from a overstyling perspective. We're just trying to find, you know, how can you put the garment in the 3D space kind of in the same way that really replicates what you would do with the fit form, where you're not overstyling it, but doing what you have to do. And this was a great explanation, Kim. Thanks for some options to get there.
Super. All right. And you thought you were just seeing a plus size launch. So,
Okay.
Chris, you want to wrap this up?
Yes, I do. You know, we want to talk a little bit about measuring because, you know, as I mentioned earlier, and we know there's a huge trust factor in it, but you really do have a digital twin between your fit form and your virtual ALVAFORM. We really encourage you to look at the shape of that body more than anything, but we also understand that there's going to be times when you're going to want to take a measurement. And so, we just want to point out it's important to be certain that you understand what 3D measurement tools are available within your chosen software. And there are different variables in each one, and choosing the right option is important. You want to choose an option that is most like measuring with the tape measure, just as you would in the physical fit form. And this is just an example of the measuring options that are available in Clo. And as you can see, there's 6 different ones. And you really want to familiarize yourself with what each one does, because even if it may say measures like it has the word tape measure in there, you still need to understand the differences that you might see with each one of those, which would cause you to come up with a different solution for your body if the measurement comes up incorrect. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide, Dawn. And so having said that, we really encourage you to take advantage of the tool that we have online as well for your virtual ALVAFORM. And it's the ALVAFORM measurement manual. Many of you that have our fit forms are probably very familiar with that manual. We have a new version that's just been recently released, and we encourage you to take a look at that as well. The ALVAFORM measurement manual is based on using a physical tape, and it really is the forms in it measured from a practical use perspective. And that's what's really important. And just keep in mind when you are measuring, just like the fit form has a 1/4 inch tolerance, 0.6 centimeters, the virtual ALVAFORM also has a measurement tolerance, and that's within 1/8 of an inch or 0.3 centimeters. Okay.
Thanks so much, Chris. That's valuable. Again, this is stuff we get all the time, questions we get all the time. We felt this is a great opportunity to be able to share that. So thanks, ladies. So, another thing that I really want you to get, if there's anything you get out of this, is the importance of size sets. It's so important. I said it 3 times here. And why am I saying that? It's because in today's world, there's no standard that is complete without size sets. So let's talk about size sets for a minute and explain it. So as you know, as we pointed out, we created the core size body at a 50x. So again, think about it like any other regular range. You've got your core evaluation size, and then we decide, okay, how many sizes do we need beyond that core size? So we work together, and from a practical point of view, we've taken this size set all the way up, to the, I'm so sorry, my doggone it. I'm on my laptop, so all these things jump in front of me. So size 62, right? So why is this important? It's important because not only will you need this technical tool to evaluate your entire size range, like even if you don't do it, if a vendor does it, but we find that these size sets, when it comes to setting your standardization, are very valuable for the cross-functional teams, right? So if you say you've got a barrier to making plus size product and it's this big mystery, well, what the hell does she look like, right? Well, in this case, you can look throughout the entire range, and people can get a better idea of what the product you're creating and how it's going to have to be accommodated on the body. Another thing that you have to think about here is how many sizes do we need? How big is big? And for every brand, that's going to be a different decision. I'll speak a little bit more about that a little later, but we tried to provide you with a size set that would fit most brands' needs well. Of course, if you find yourself in a scenario where you need something else, you know who to call. But in this case, this should really cover the needs of the market very well. So another way to look at the size set, and we love, again, here's a wonderful way to use 3D to visualize the imagery that you couldn't possibly do if you had physical size sets lined up in a room across your technical room. So you get on the left, you get kind of the superimposed, really important areas of the body that we're dialing in on, right? We're dialing in on the armhole and the crotch and the rise, and how that the size is distributed evenly front to back or not evenly front to back, as the case may be. And on the loop to the right, you've got that kind of nested doll going on that shows you the smallest size to the biggest size. And you really get the opportunity to visualize how this product is going to get bigger and the body that it's going to accommodate. Chris, anything you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, what I love about these images, when you start talking about garment grading, again, seeing like the visual on the left where all the sizes are stacked on top of each other. You can see the armhole shape, you can see the rise shape, and we want to keep in mind that what we're creating, we are responding to the body, and we are also keeping in mind that this is a fit tool and it has to be able to best accommodate commercialized production, right? And so being able to see the consistency between the shapes from a grading perspective is very helpful.
Okay, Chris, I'm not going to rush everybody, but we do a time check here because this is taking a little longer than we like, but we just have so much to share.
Yes, indeed, we do. Yeah, so we want to talk, Kim and I want to talk a little bit about inclusively fitting on the plus size customer. So the visual you see here is the 38 European women against the size new 50X plus women. And, you know, when you're talking about now accommodating that customer in a garment, it really is more than just looking at a measurement sheet and adjusting measurements and making every measurement match along the pattern, and doing that from the women's base size up. When we talk about utilizing a garment grade, it really isn't an optimal choice to achieve the pattern shape that you need when you're considering especially mass production. It can be done, but it can be very complicated to do. So understanding the plus body shape and proportion is essential in developing the best possible inclusive fit, and creating a core size block pattern that really maps to the specific shape, proportion, and measurements of the plus body. That really is the key in being able to achieve the best possible inclusive fit for the plus body. So again, this is just a view of the standard that Dawn was showing you. And in this particular instance, depending on how far across the size range that you really want to accommodate, there may be the best option may be to consider an additional core size. And in this case, we're recommending, if you were to space it out, the size 58X. Now, you know, we would make this kind of recommendation if we were talking to a women's extended size range, which is real common in some countries, or even a specific size range, especially in plus where the shape is changing a lot and you really want to accommodate that customer. So it maybe requires two core sizes depending on the breadth of your range. Let's go ahead and go forward. We're going to walk you through just an exercise about understanding body shape and proportion across the size range. So, you know, the new standard is so new that we do not have our blocks ready for that yet. So we're going to show an example for you here. Kim and I are going to share where we're looking at our Alvanon standard North American women. And you can see it's a broad size range. Our core size is 6. By the time you get to the upper end of that range and you start to get to the size 18, the body really is transitioning into a plus shape. And this is where, you know, we really could benefit here from an additional core size at size 22. And so I'm going to turn it over to Kim now. We're going to walk you through the exercise we did with our blocks, with our grading, and just show you some examples and how valuable this size set can be in 3D for reviewing these things as well. Take it away, Kim.
Sure. Okay. Well, this is an example of a shirt that we've graded across the size range. And so this is the front, back, and sleeve pattern pieces. And these pattern pieces have been graded to ensure maintain balance and appropriate shape for construction, but yet so that it's feasible for production. The front and the back are graded the same. There is a different or a non-linear grade at the side seams where the waist is graded a little bit more than the bust and the low hip. But other than that, the front and the back lengths are maintained. The sleeve cap usually is graded in relationship to the armhole to maintain that across the range. In this instance, we are grading the sleeve at the wrist so that it does fit onto the entire range of the virtual ALVAFORMs in the size set. Sleeve length is subjective. Let's go on and look at the next one. This is the shirt that is on the forms, and I haven't put every size up here because they won't fit on there. But if you'll notice from the core size 6 going up to the 22, starting at about the 14, maybe the 18 more, you're starting to see some fit issues. Now on our blocks, we always have reference lines, and those reference lines map to different areas on the body. So we have one at the bust, the waist, the hip, and so that we can check the fit of our blocks and make sure that that is being maintained. Now we're getting, everything is fitting fine on the front of the garment. But if you look at the next slide, you'll start to notice that as that body is changing, the 18 and 22, the front length, the front of the body is growing more than the back. And so the back length is a little bit too long, and you're starting to see that shift. You're starting to see some drag lines in the bust. And this is an excellent video of working in 3D where I can take that shirt and I can remove components like the sleeve and the collar and so forth. So I can really analyze the fit of the front and the back piece and the balance on the body. So we're just looking at 4 sizes. I think we have 0, 0, 6, 14, and 22. But what we're noticing here is look at the armhole and the shape of the armhole. We're just really not getting enough coverage on the front of the body. And you're seeing the drag lines below. Also, on the size 22, the back neck is riding up so high. You know, I want to reach in and I want to take that 22 and I want to pull it down on the front because we're missing that length, but that neck isn't allowing me to do that. But you couldn't see this with all the components on it, you know, the collar and the sleeve and so forth. So here's a closer look of those same sizes and looking at the armhole again and some of those fit issues I talked about. Even on the front of the garment, you're seeing a little bit of gaping of fabric, you know, just below the neck on the chest. But by having a second core size and developing a second block, we're able to get a better shape in that armhole and maintain some of the balance. So look at the difference between the graded 22 and the core 22 and how much improvement we got from that. And this is just a quick look at the pattern. The gray one is the graded 22 and the orange one is the additional core size 22. The armhole depth. Look at the difference in the back from the high point of the shoulder to the bottom of the armhole, the across shoulder, the back neck drop, the sleeve cap height difference, the girth grade distributions, which is an interesting one. Look at where the side seam placement is. We have the same measurements from one top to the other, but look at where the side seam placement is on the back versus the front. The bust dart, the shoulder slope, neck depth. It's a completely different pattern.
So the next time somebody asks you, the next time somebody asks you, why can't you just grade up into the bigger sizes? You'll have a better idea why.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Well, how big is big?
Another example.
Yeah.
Yep, this is another example of just making an adjustment to the girth distribution. Here, if we had a 0.5 centimeter on the front and a 0.5 centimeter on the back, traditionally on a balanced grade, by splitting that so that you have, you know, about 1.6 centimeter on the front and 8 centimeter on the back, you're shifting that side seam a little bit further to the back. And then that would allow a little bit more coverage in that front armhole. So this is showing the insufficient coverage in that armhole. This is a client product that we're fitting with, again, without those components, without the sleeve and without the neck hole, you know, just to check the balance of the garment. If you look at the next slide, here the grade has been shifted and you can see that we're getting a little bit better coverage on that front armhole.
Super. So again,
it's a mix of things, isn't it?
Yeah.
Not only the right core size, but also then thinking further about how the grade distribution can impact considerations, especially when it comes to plus sizing.
Absolutely. Oh, thank you so much, guys. That was information that I'm sure that people are going to really enjoy. And I really am a little concerned about our time. So forgive me for talking fast, but I'd like to be able to wrap this up here. So just going back to the inclusive fitting on the plus size range, right? We develop all these sizes here because we know that many brands who are starting out might limit their range coverage, right? They might say, hey, we maybe only want to offer 3 sizes and test it out. We may want to see how it reads and maybe we'll order the next biggest size. But like Chris and Kim were just explaining, if you are a uniform company, you have 100% fulfillment obligations, you're really going to have to consider where you might need to reblock again if you want to get a really good fit. So this range is meant to be dynamic. It's meant to cover a number of different business end use cases, but we feel obligated to explain kind of the technical components behind there that you might not have been thinking about. So, wow, we had a lot to cover there, but let me see if I can summarize this and bring it back to, you know, kind of the most important points here. So inclusivity in the digital age, it's really closer than you think it is, right? And the other thing that we have to separate out is inclusivity will be your brand and how you want to market it. How do you want to talk about it? How do you want to show the imagery? It's all about the social messaging. Standardization is how you get there, right? You just saw a beautiful example of why you can't grade yourself into plus size, right? We've offered you a new range here that we start out with a core size of 50X as the baseline, and then the full size sets allow for full size inclusivity beyond that core fit size, right? So as you're deciding if and how you might approach this market, the clarity in the messaging is super important. So as I said, plus size really internally is a technical term. It allows teams to organize themselves around a concept that's about a special sizing type, right? You could use that in the market because many people do, but you might want to consider other terms that you think within your brand will ultimately resonate better with the consumer. That's the fun part, choosing how you're going to market, what you're going to call it. But the technical standardization is how you get to execute that vision. Chris, you want to tick through these things that you had already talked about that are super important?
Yeah, just when you're thinking about bridging those traditional tools into 3D, you know, be trusting that the virtual ALVAFORM literally is a digital twin of the physical form. And, you know, some of the things to think about that we reviewed when you're reviewing a reference demo form, keep those in mind: lighting, background, you know, when we're talking about things like setting friction. And don't be afraid, turn that form all around to really get a view of the shape that's there, so you really understand what you're working with.
Awesome. And then again, right, this new standard is really there to provide you a practical access to these tools that can help you get inclusivity into your range, right? And another super important point here, as the industry continues to advance, which it does in the utilization of 3D, modern digital standardization requires complete size sets, right? In addition to that core fit evaluation size. You're going to need them in the future. You're going to need them today. So please, if you're going to set yourself up for success, modern digital standardization, it's an essential first step as you prepare for your future of digital product creation. And I'd just like to close on a little bit of a teaser here. You know, those sizing standards that you put into the 3D are going to continue to yield benefits in additional applications throughout your fit and sizing, what we're going to refer to as your ecosystem. This is a teaser slide. I'm not going to go into detail on it, but I hope you sign up for our 3D Tech Fest in the fall in September, because Jason and team have some really exciting new developments to share with you. But remember, the foundation is your tools, your digital tools, which were the literal digital twins of the physical, and how those tools can be used beyond just the creating a product and throughout your fit and sizing ecosystem. So on that note, we'd love to thank you very much. I'm so sorry that we put more here than we thought we were going to, but we just wanted to share it with you, which means that we don't have a lot of time for Q&A, Saul.
We do not, but listen, it was a great presentation. I love the feedback on the chat. I think, you know, as you can see, people really enjoyed it. So thank you all for all the hard work you put into this presentation. We do have time for a couple of questions. So I'm going to go ahead and try to get through as many of them as possible. All right, so the first question is this plus size range suitable for brands with a customer base only in South European countries? That's a good one.
I will take that. When we call the European standard generically, we keep all countries in the same conversation. It might be in Southern Europe, you might only need a few sizes in that range. Maybe you don't need, you know, all the way to the bigger sizes in the range. I think it's a misconception that in Southern Europe, they don't need it. But this European standard is more about having more consistency in the region, and it would be appropriate for both Northern and Southern Europe, as well as UK, obviously part of Europe.
Perfect. Okay. The next question, can you combine an Atelier basic full size range with this new, with this plus size range?
The answer to that is yes, you could, but the devil in the detail there is the word combine. We're not going to combine them. we would offer them as separate ranges, right? And that's a technical designation, and it's also a business decision. If you can't have two 50s in your range, right? You can't have a 50 Atelier and a 50X unless you're really clearly marketing as a different range. So if the question is the core size, if your Atelier is your core shape, will this new standard work? The answer is absolutely yes.
Got it. All right. Well, listen, there's a couple more questions. I just want to let everyone know that we're going to do our best. We will answer them and probably email everyone the Q&A, but we're 2 minutes to the hour, and so I don't want to take up anyone's time. And I do have Ton here with us again. Ton, any closing remarks? What did you think?
Well, I'm a bit, what do you call it in good English, flabbergasted with a lot of information which was shared by the team here, and you said it right on. I thought we were going to look at a plus size women European presentation here and an introduction, but it was much more. So thanks a lot as well for tagging in 3D with sharing that experience. So I'm just very happy, and I hope that everybody's excited. Just out of Europe, I mean, I hope you can find us, reach out to us, reach out to our team, the people we have in the various countries and regions. Thanks a lot. And once again, thanks Don, Chris, and Kim, and Liz, and the rest of the team for this. Very happy with this.
You're welcome. And thank you. Thanks for joining us, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us again for this launch. As a reminder, this was being recorded, and we're going to go ahead and send the recording to you in the next 24 hours. We will also share with you the specs for this new standard series, so keep an eye out for that. All right, from me and everyone in the Alvanon team, thank you so much for joining us. See you next time.
Bye.
So long.